Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Sanderson Farms DFS Tactics show. Got quite a bit to get into, two mixed condition models, plus we need to check on Wind Finder and then figure out all of our lineups. So let's not waste any time. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It is going to make you a much smarter gambler and a much better DFS player. Go check them out. It's well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. If you want to see the betting cards that I'm going to put up after the show, give me a follow to Twitter. That's where I post that information, as well as research that I've done throughout the week for the tournament of the week. This week obviously being the Sanderson Farms. I usually put that out on Monday. If you are wanting to see some deeper dive into the research on how I find the patterns that I do for the winners and the research that I post, if you want to see the critique that I give myself the week after the tournament and figure out how I did with my mixed condition model, all of that good stuff. If you want to see me rank my rookies, give me a follow at Twitch. I do the Twitch streams in the morning. I think I'm going to set a solid day schedule of Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and perhaps a Saturday if the demand is there enough. Wednesday's pretty tough because it's the day that I prep for this show and do all of my DFS stuff for my own. And then Thursday, I generally just try to relax after a week of shows. But tentatively speaking, it'll be Monday, Tuesday, Friday. But I'll let you know when and where on social media. So make sure you give me a follow at all of the links in the description. And then finally, we're live. Chat is open. I want to hear from you all. The first obvious question is, do you think Sam Burns is a must play? It's an interesting dilemma coming off the President's Cup. Who are you pivoting to? Who are you fading? What kind of lineups are you thinking about generating? So jump in chat. Want to hear from you all and see what you all are thinking for the Sanderson Farms this week. So let's get into it. Let's figure out our strategies and tactics for the 2023 Sanderson Farms. And we start with Wind Finder. And admittedly, I did not check a whole lot during the week, and then got to this morning and said, oh, Hurricane Ian's down there. Might want to check what the side effects or whatnot, what effects that's going to have. So you see here Thursday's super forecast. You have a lot of wind throughout the day, but no rain, which is a good thing. Apparently this course, Country Club of Jackson, got pummeled with rain in the month of August. So good thing that they're not projected to get any rain. I don't see any rain today either. But here's Thursday, a lot of wind, and unfortunately for the Thursday AM, looks like they're getting a lot of wind. Generally, you are going to get very little wind in the morning, and the wind picks up in the afternoon. Looks like all day is a pretty consistent 10 to 15 miles an hour, gusts, up into the upper teens and 20s. Here, I don't really see an AM/PM split, maybe a Thursday PM, but the whole field on Thursday is going to deal with wind. And then Friday the same. Now the Friday morning looks to be a bit more calm, sustained, but again, if I had to give an advantage, I would do the Thursday PM Friday AM split, but I'm not factoring that into my rankings at all. If I am in a tiebreaker, then I might consider the player or players that are teeing off Friday PM or Thursday PM, Friday AM, excuse me. But again, I don't have that factored into my rankings at all. But I do want to show you the Wind Finder forecast, because I do not have any wind in my mixed condition model, and I don't think I'm going to for the foreseeable future. I want to see how it works without wind, because generally I'll put in some wind metrics in there. So instead of doing that, I will show you Wind Finder, and then I'm going to come over here to Fantasy National, and I have this sorted all the way back to January 1st very quickly. No other filters except for moderate and windy. By Fantasy Nationals terms, windy is considered 17 miles an hour or above sustained winds. I do not know what the moderate is, so that's why I put moderate and windy. But I go all the way back to January 1st, just so we have enough rounds. I do 36 rounds. Here are your top wind players. Chris Kirk, Keegan Bradley, Sam Burns, Gary Woodland, Russell Henley, Brandon Wu, JT Poston, Stuart Sink, Sahith Theegala, and on down. So I'll let you get a good look of who plays well in the wind, or at least they have this calendar year. And then the other end of the spectrum, here are the players that don't or have not played well in the wind this calendar year. Andrew Landry, Harry Higgs, Nick Watney, Dylan Wu, Jason Duffner, Henrik Norlander, Brandon Matthews, Max McGreevy, Cole Hammer, Jim Herman, Joel Damon, and on down. So again, let me know how you feel about the layout of the show that I have if there is wind involved. Do you like seeing the rankings right before the reveal of my mixed condition model and all of that? Does that give you any value? All that good stuff. So please put it in the comments how you feel about Wind Finder, and then coming to see just on a strokes gained total basis for the wind instead of me factoring it into a mixed condition model. Would really appreciate that feedback. But anyway, so I wanted to start the show with that. Now let's move over to my full field mixed condition model, and then we'll go to the rookie or Korn Ferry Tour grad rankings after this. So for the Sanderson Farms, we talked throughout the week about whether we wanted to see driving distance, greens, good drives gained, all of that. But the simple fact is, off the tee mattered for a lot of the upper end of the leaderboard. You know, your top 10s, your top 5s, and especially your winners were really good off the tee. So I went ahead and put 10% in strokes gained off the tee. I put 5% in strokes gained approach. If you remember from Monday night, the end of the show, I brought up my mixed condition model from last year, and I had 15% in strokes gained approach. I dropped it all the way to 5 this year. Could be arguable that you should put 10. I put it at 5 because there were a lot of things I wanted to factor in. Hey P, how you doing? Hope your week has went well. Hopefully you are ready for some Sanderson Farms, some good DFS, maybe some wagers. How's your DFS baseball going? I've been fumbling around through that a little bit whenever I decide to take 10 minutes to do that. But how are things going? Thanks for jumping in chat like you always do when you're able to catch the show. So there's 15% of the data model. I put a full quarter of the data model, 25% in strokes gained putting, Bermuda, fast, and lightning greens. It is simply the most important factor here at Sanderson Farms. It's there's no other way to say it. We've seen it all week, how putting just dominated every single metric in terms of top 10s, top 5s, winners, all of that. The outlier being last year, Sam Burns actually lost strokes putting, but every single one of the rest of the top 31, I think. So second place through 31st all gained strokes and putting. It's just the be-all, end-all here at the Country Club of Jackson. So I put a full 25% there. 15% in birdies or better gained, easy to par. Again, this is I don't want to say a hedge, but I have a pretty strong feeling that birdies are better and easy are going to be a big factor. So I put 15% there, especially around the easy to par. 5% in driving distance, 5% in par 3s, 5% in par 4s. I did not include any individual length of par 3s. I think we saw that throughout the week, that there was no real dominant length of par 3 that mattered. It's kind of the same with par 4s. I started to focus maybe a little bit on the 400 to 450, 450 to 500 at the end of the show Monday night. Started to think about it, and I said, par 4s are just mitigated in importance here already. Why am I going to separate out a specific length if the totality of par 4s are mitigated? So did not focus on the length. Instead, par 5s. 20% in the par 5s, 550 to 600. So really, really wanted to hammer that, so you can see where the three main metrics that I focused on this week. Putting, birdies are better when it's easy, and the par 5s. Now, a couple of things here that might surprise you, and I talked about it right at the end of the show Monday, and I just seen it earlier that day. I put 5% in strokes gained putting from 10 to 15 feet. We saw that it was about a quarter of a shot more important than the average full field course on the PGA Tour putting from 10 to 15 feet. So I put 5% in there. That is 5% of the data model that is very speculative. If it's wrong, then there's 5% of the data model that's just not useful or going to lead us astray. 5% in 3-putt avoidance on fast and lightning Bermuda greens. 3 putts are just about as common as the average tour event here, but the reason why I think it plays a little bit more important is that some of these Korn Ferry Tour guys, they might not have been on lightning speed greens. Beginning of the season, players might be rusty. Sometimes lightning greens can really throw players off. So I think 3-putt avoidance will be a decent hedge. And again, if it's wrong, it's wrong, and that's going to lead us astray. But you can see the majority of the data model, 25% in just strokes gained putting, an extra 10% in putting 10 to 15 feet, 3-putt avoidance, these different metrics, just because putting is so daggone important here at the Country Club of Jackson. So there is my mixed condition model for the full field Sanderson Farms. It's always important to note what you might lose to or what you are weak to. Right off the bat, I am weak to anything over 7,400 yards. If the Sanderson Farms truly does play over 7,400 yards, I'm going to be weak to it because I did not factor any of that in. We saw that on Sunday and a little bit of Monday. A round here at the Country Club of Jackson hasn't played over 7,400 in 3 years. So I went ahead and took that out, did not factor it in. If the par 4s end up being a little bit more important, or the par 3s for the winner ends up being more important, then I could be a little weak to that. All of that good stuff. Otherwise, I do feel like this is pretty strong. I tried to mimic as much as I did from last year's data model when I had Sam Burns number 1, he wins, etc., etc. Maybe greens need to be factored in here. We'll see. I had 35% of a data model to play around with. I added a little bit into putting, added these 2 metrics down here, played around with some percentages. So that is where I ended up in terms of a mixed condition model for the Sanderson Farms. So let's go ahead and move on over to Microsoft Excel. And first thing I'm going to do, because I did not save the rookie or Korn Ferry Tour data model in Fantasy National, let me run through that really quickly for you all. And a lot of it is going to be the same. I just had to add some percentages some places because we don't have pure putting statistics. So the 25% strokes gained putting on Bermuda, the 5% from 10 to 15 feet, the 5% three putt avoidance. I had to move some of that percentage around, but you'll see some very similar metrics. So instead of 25% in strokes gained putting Bermuda, I put 25% in the par 5s, 550 to 600. That's one of, if not the most important factor here at the Country Club of Jackson, this and putting. I put an extra 5% or 20% total in birdies or better gained when it's easy. So 45% of the data model in these two metrics. I put 10% in par 3s, 10% in par 4s. I did put 10% in strokes gained total easy. I'm not going to do that much, if at all, for the full field. But because we lack some of the data for the Korn Ferry Tour guys, if a course is long or short, difficult or easy, I'll probably use some strokes gained total just to get a feel for how well or not the players played those rounds on the Korn Ferry Tour. Again, speaking to the fact that we don't have any putting data, I put 10% in strokes gained total on Bermuda. This is the closest I can get in terms of putting. It looked like it worked out pretty well last week, or 2 weeks ago, excuse me, at the Fortinet. You see these players that were very good on bent, and they ended up playing very well. Now, is that all putting? No, it's not. Some of that, Taylor Montgomery, strokes gained approach, around the green, all that stuff. But in general, that was a pretty good metric that lined up with results. Wasn't perfect, but it was pretty darn good. So I'm gonna repeat that, see how it goes this week that we are on a different green surface, being Bermuda. So 10% there, 10% in driving distance, and I had 5% left over. I ended up putting it in opportunities gained. I want to see, because there's no strokes gained approach data for the Korn Ferry Tour, I like to see who gives themselves opportunities. Maybe not convert them, but at least they have the propensity to give themselves opportunities, and if they have a hot putting week, they'll take advantage. So there's the 100% and the metrics and filters that I used for the rookie or Korn Ferry Tour rankings. And my rankings came out as such. Taylor Montgomery, number 1. Probably no surprise. He finished 3rd at the Fortinet. Cost $9,600. A lot of people are on Taylor Montgomery. He deserves to be, I don't know if he deserves to be $9,600, but he's a very, very good player. He is ready for the PGA Tour. So he's number 1. Ben Griffin, number 2. Zed Chang Do, number 3. Austin Eckroat, MJ Dafu, Augusto Nunez, Davis Thompson, Paul Haley, Justin Suh, and Ben On are my top 10 Korn Ferry Tour grads this week for the Sanderson Farms. I am considering about 5 or 6 of these players. Davis Thompson is about where I'm stopping, and he is very, very popular when we go to the full rankings and the ownership percentages and all that stuff. Okay. I guess I can, he plays easy courses well. At least gets his birdies on easy courses. He plays the par 5s fine. Okay, he's long. Probably helps here at the Sanderson Farms, but when you see his ownership percentage, I'm just out on Davis Thompson just because of the ownership. Now, there are a couple of players here that I really, really like, and I'm hoping one turns into another Paul Haley, and I get to pat myself on the back next week for mentioning him. But there are a couple of players here that I like beyond the obvious Taylor Montgomery. So there is my Korn Ferry Tour grad rankings. Now let's move to the full field Sanderson Farms rankings for this week. And you see here my top 10: Sam Burns, Emiliano Grillo, JT Poston, Stephan Jaeger, Ben Griffin, Davis Riley, Wyndham Clark, Scott Stallings, Brandon Wu, and Michael Gligic. So a couple of things jump off right at me. Sam Burns, no doubt, heavy favorite here, deserves to be, but I'm going to lose to him. One, he is very, very popular for good reason. He's the overwhelming tournament favorite. But I'm going to fade him the same reason I did the President's Cup players at the Fortinet. After an emotional week, a physically draining week, and as a defending champion, you have a lot of media commitments. Look, Sam Burns deserves to be the favorite. It would not shock me at all if he comes out and plays extremely well again. But I'm going to fade him from the President's Cup and the high ownership. So that's one player I'm choosing to lose to. And then Christian Bezaden, who is way down here in my rankings anyway, so I really wouldn't have considered him. But even if he was higher up, I'd have faded him as well if he, or because he played at the President's Cup. Same with Munoz, but he withdrew. So I'm fading both of the President's Cup players. A couple other things here. Ben Griffin was number 2 in my Korn Ferry Tour grad rankings, but he's 5th overall, even ahead of Taylor Montgomery. Be aware that he only has 4, maybe 8 rounds, because I know he played the Wyndham. He played another tournament, I believe, before the Wyndham. These metrics you can see up here do not factor in the Fortinet, not yet. I wanted to keep it in a vacuum because once we get enough data, probably to the end of October, then I'll start factoring in the Fortinet and probably just move forward. But I just wanted to see who has played well throughout the calendar year other than the Fortinet. The Fortinet's one tournament. You don't want to overreact to one tournament. So it's really interesting to see Ben Griffin 5th when he was 2nd in my Korn Ferry Tour rankings, and number 1, Taylor Montgomery, is way down here. A couple of reasons for that. Again, remember, my rankings are taking a weighted average of these 3 things. So you can see Ben Griffin's a projected 6.7% owned. Taylor Montgomery's getting hurt because he is double that. 14.2, or close to double. So that is one factor that's hurting Taylor Montgomery. They both have not played this course, being Korn Ferry Tour grads, so they have the same value there. But Ben Griffin ranked 2nd in my Fantasy National analytic ranks. Again, it is skewed because he only has 6 to 8 rounds. So that's why I'm still treating the Korn Ferry Tour grads in a vacuum. So, essentially I am treating Davis Riley as my 5th rated player, and then adjusting my Korn Ferry Tour rankings to who I want to consider for lineups, so on and so forth. So just be aware when you see a Korn Ferry Tour grad, they had some rounds on the PGA Tour. Like Taylor Montgomery had 2 rounds on the PGA Tour last year. I think it was the Farmers or the U.S. Open. Like, it was a premier event that he got to play, and he missed the cut. That's why he only has 2 rounds, but he got to play in it, so he has data. So anyway, so be aware of that. Players like Ben Griffin, Michael Kim, like Matthias Schmid, even though I'm high on him again. Matthias Schmid only has, I think, 6 to 10 rounds on the PGA Tour during this time frame. So there you go. There is a look at my rankings, all things considered, my analytic rankings, my course value, which is an attempt, and again, it's fully admitted that it's an attempt to put a value on past performance at the course, and then percent owned, these three factors make up a a value that I then rank. Last week I had, 2 weeks ago for the Fortinet, I had 60%, 20%, 20%. Well, the course value didn't really matter. We saw Denny McCarthy was 0 for 4 at the Fortinet, missed the cut every single time, did not play well there. What did he, top 20? Top 25. So clearly, the course value didn't matter for him. Like Brendan Todd, he had never played well there, top 10. But Sahith Theegala had played well there, and he finished T6. So I can't ignore it completely, but I definitely lowered the amount of weight that I put into the course value. So again, throughout the fall and continuously, really, I'm going to keep adjusting these percentages till I feel I get comfortable, or a comfortable setting that will be uniform for every tournament. And there might not be one. Maybe some courses you have to have some course history. So it's a work in progress, admittedly, but this is an attempt at gathering all three of those things, putting them together, as opposed to just the analytics rankings. So, with that said, let's take a look at some of these players. Actually, in fact, before I do that, I apologize. Let me sort this by price. Let's take a quick look at some players. Sort on column E, largest to smallest. All right, so in the 10Ks, you have 4 players: Sam Burns, Sahith Theegala, JT Poston, and Russell Henley. Well, you can see that I am pretty clearly low on one of the 4 guys based on their overall ranking here. Again, I mentioned Sam Burns, number 1 overall. He deserves to be number 1 overall, the heavy favorite, number 1 in strokes gained putting on Bermuda. He was in the top 10 in windy conditions. Really only has one bad stat, and that's strokes gained off the tee, because he gets wayward, because his distance is just fine. All of the putting metrics are great. The par 5s he takes advantage of. He goes low in easy rounds. There's a lot to like here. I'm just fading him because of the President's Cup. Sahith I'm out on. This is a dangerous game I'm playing, so I'm fading the top 2 priced players. A lot of the analytics community doesn't seem to be on Sahith as much as you would think. The putting has not been good. 3-putt avoidance, pretty bad. And he hasn't really excelled at anything, maybe other than these par 4s. So I'm out on Sahith. I really like JT Poston. It's a shame to see him at 15.5%, but I really like JT Poston. That's chalk I'll probably eat. Russell Henley's a little different. 17% is a lot. That's a lot of chalk to eat. But I mean, he goes low when it's easy. The iron play is always going to be there. It's Russell Henley. Top 5 on par 3s, if those matter. I mean, the putting metrics even. For as much as he gets, I don't want to say, for as much as he can disappear with the putter, his metrics are really good in terms of Bermuda putting. So there's a lot to like here with Russell Henley. Now, he hasn't played the course the best. It's pretty middling, it's slightly better than middling performance. So, combine the course value of just above middling, really high ownership. That's why he's getting dropped to 15th. I think Russell Henley will be fine. Just really, really high on JT Poston. So there's a look at the 10Ks. I'm going to go Poston and then Henley, Burns, and then Theegala. It should go Burns, Poston, Henley, Theegala. I'm just fading Burns because of the President's Cup. The 9Ks, Denny McCarthy, Taylor Montgomery, Scott Stallings, Keegan, Christian Bezaidnout, Milan Agrino, and Davis Riley. Again, for the same reason Burns, I'm out on Bezaidnout, even though he doesn't rate out well anyway. Denny McCarthy is very interesting. Now, he has played this event very well in the past, as you can see by the very low number here. He didn't rate out as well as he did at the Fortinet. and his ownership is a little bit on the higher side. So he's at 18th. He's higher than he was for the Fortinet. The Fortinet was interesting because that's a short game course, and he rated out well, like I thought he would, but he had never played that event well. So Denny McCarthy's another interesting case this week because he has played this event well. He's not rated out as high, but he's still pretty far up there in my top 20. So I'm going to use some Denny McCarthy. Now the putting from 10 to 15 feet has not been very good. He's more so just avoiding the 3 putts. So if this range ends up mattering, then let me say this again. If this range ends up mattering and Denny McCarthy struggles, then I'm going to feel really, really good about including this metric in here. But then again, it could be completely off. So this is a hedge. This is my Nick's went a little off the rails, or Nick has solved the matrix. Either one is completely viable. So I like Denny McCarthy this week. I'll use him. Taylor Montgomery, you see 14%. Very, very popular. Deservedly so. But 9,600 and at 14%. That's why he's rated 42nd. Even though he rates out pretty well in my model. It's a lot of ownership. It's a lot of price. Ugh. I'm going to use Taylor Montgomery, but it's going to be sparingly. Scott Stallings always seems to rate out well in my model. He's putt extremely well on these fast lightning Bermuda surfaces. He is decent enough with the distance. He doesn't have a bad stat. He's only really elite in the strokes gained total putting. But he doesn't have a bad stat. Par 5s could improve. The birdies are better when it's easy could improve, but they're not horrendous by any means. So Scott Stallings is fine, but again, 15%. That's a whole lot of chalk to eat. Keegan, just kind of lukewarm on Keegan. Like if this were bent, I'd feel a little bit better because he started to putt bent very, very well at the end of the PGA Tour season last season, 2 or 3 months ago. His Bermuda has been iffy. I mean, Keegan overall putting has been iffy, but he got better on bent, so I'm kind of lukewarm on Keegan. Zayden Hoot out, and you see Grillo and Riley. I was really high on Grillo. He kind of faded on the weekend at the Fortinet, but he was right there. And I love Davis Riley this week. Even though he has been very modest in his success here at this event, the ownership is pretty darn high. You see he was 5th in my analytics rankings, 6th overall. This feels like it could be the Maverick McNeely of the Fortinet. I thought everything lined up well for Maverick McNeely. He missed the cut. I'm going to play a whole lot of Davis Riley. Number 1 in birdies are better when it's easy. Number 5 in putting. Top 10 or top 15 in distance. Top 10 off the tee. Like his bad stat is the par 5s. That could be an issue, but there's a lot to like here with Davis Riley. So I'm going to use a whole lot of Davis Riley, even at the 14.5%. So if I'm using Davis Riley, I'm not using Poston, and vice versa. So there's a look at the 9s. Let's move to the 8s fairly quickly. I think you can still see. Yeah. Sepp Straka, Thomas Detry, Adam Hadwin, Harris English, Taylor Moore, Sam Power, Trey Mullinex, Chris Kirk, Gary Woodland, Wyndham Clark. There's a couple of guys here, like Harris English, again, is interesting because his metrics are so bad. He was injured last season. So, is he going to find his form soon? Probably. I mean, he was I think he was top 10 in the world at some point. He was just playing extremely well. What do you do at the Fortinet? I cannot remember. Harris English. There he is. Yeah, he top 10 at the Fortinet. So, if you have a strong belief that he is healthy, it's probably wise to fire him up. He's still only at 7.5%. He's played this event fairly well. He's a very good putter on Bermuda. The irons are going to be a lot better than what they are showing. He's better than 80th with the irons when he's healthy. So that's why these metrics are so down on him. You're betting on the talent of Harris English. Is the health all the way completely back? Don't know, but you're betting on the talent. Others in here, like Chris Kirkey's the number one wind player, so maybe you boost him if you think the wind's going to play a big factor. Wyndham Clark is very interesting. He's kind of like the Denny McCarthy from the Fortinet. The numbers love him. He's got very low ownership, but his success here at the Sanderson Farms has been it's been I think he's 3 for 5 in making the cut, but none of the finishes were all inspiring. Didn't give a lot of confidence. So I'm going to use Wyndham Clark because the numbers say I should use him. I'm going to treat him like a Denny McCarthy. I'll probably try to use him sparingly because of the lack of tournament history or tournament success. Let's see others. I like Trey Mullinax, but he's so damn popular. 16% projected owned. That's probably a fade for me just because of the ownership. Like, I like the player, but that's way too high of ownership. Somebody else that's, in my opinion, way too high ownership, and I love the player, Thomas Detry. Again, he was a very, very integral part of my success at the Fortinet in the lineups that I had him. But 15% is too high. Love the player, hate the ownership. So elsewhere in here, Taylor Moore, fine. Again, 15%. That's a high. Don't like it. Seamus Power, The one that really is curious for me is Sepp Straka here at 8,900. Number 1 in strokes gained putting, Fast and Lightning Bermuda. He's top 20 in birdies are better when it's easy. There's the rest of his putting metrics, like the distance is there. We've seen that the putting is the be-all, end-all here. Sepp Straka is interesting. He's interesting. I'm considering him. Don't know if I'll use him because a lot of the other metrics are, pretty poor. Par fives, the off the tee and the approach have been bad. The last half of the PGA Tour season, par threes and par fours have been really bad. So putting makes him interesting. Hadwin kind of the same way, although he's been better at some of these other things than Sepp Straka has. So there's a quick look at the 8Ks. Like for me, I'm going to use Wyndham Clark. The numbers say I should. I would love to use Detry. He's too highly owned. Would love to use Mullinax. Too highly owned. Moore is Straka's interesting. Like 8Ks are kind of just for me. So that tells you what kind of lineups I'm building. Not going to go through a whole lot in the 7Ks. I'm just going to highlight a few guys for you. Andrew Putnam seemingly popped on a lot of the metrics. He's very low ownership. Top 30 in the analytics. What's bringing him down is the course form, course history. Number 11 in putting. Almost top 5 in par 4 performance if those end up being more important than the 5% I've put in there. Now he's not long, but do you need to be to win at the Sanderson Farms? Not really. It helps, but not really, because the course is generally fast and firm. These shorter hitters get the run out. So Putnam's interesting. Again, if you want to go on the putting, take a look at Brendan Todd. I really, really like Nick Hardy this week as well. Par fives, he devours. He's very good off the tee. His distance. Like the strokes gained putting does not look good, but when you take a look at his standalones, his 10 to 15 feet, his 3-putt avoidance, it's a little better. I think he's a better putter than this. The irons are not this bad. He was somebody else, like Taylor Pendrith, like Harris English, that was injured throughout some of the season last year. He comes back and he top 10s the U.S. Open, I think it was. He top 10'd a major. Like, the guy has talent. He was one of the premier players coming off the Korn Ferry Tour last year. I was really, really high on him. Took him in a lot of my season-long fantasy things. He disappointed because he got hurt. I'm expecting big things from Nick Hardy this year. Does it start this week? I like him. I like him this week. Can't say that it definitely starts this week, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does. Alex Smalley, somebody else I like. Like his bad metrics aren't, at the bottom end, 63rd in 3-putt avoidance, but he generally hits a lot of greens. As you see by the strokes gained approach, his distance is good, top 20. Take a look at Alex Smalley. Mark Hubbard always pops on my data models, but he has not played this course very well at all. So do you believe the analytics? Do you believe the course form? He's right at middling percent owned. So I'll use some Mark Hubbard. Let's see. That's probably about it in the upper sevens. We moved to the low sevens. I mentioned Zhang Do in the rookie rankings. I really like Stefan Jaeger this week, and a lot of people do. He's sitting at 12.5%. But look at all these premier statistics. Top 20 in overall putting. Now, the individual stuff could be worrisome. So maybe this is a little bit of fool's gold. And if it is fool's gold, well, I've been fooled because I'm going to use some Jaeger. Almost top 20 in par 5s. He's top 10 in both. Birdies are better when it's easy and in approach. Second in par 3s, which we saw is extremely important for the winners. Not necessarily for the top 10s and top 5s, but it got very important for the winners. Take a look at Stefan Jaeger. Davis Thompson, I was talking about in the rookie rankings. He's a 12% ownership. I just don't see it from the Korn Ferry Tour Grad rankings and the one tournament he put on Bermuda during 2022 was bad. Now it's one tournament. You can't knock a guy for just one tournament, but I just don't see it. Same thing with Michael Gligic. He was very highly rated at the Fortinet. He missed the cut. I was very skeptical then. I'm skeptical now. He has not played this course exceptionally well, but he's very low owned, and the metrics love him for whatever reason. So he's ranked 10th. I'm going to be very, very gun shy on Michael Gligic. Top 15 in the par 5s, and there's a lot of weight there, so that helps him. Top 20 in off the tee, okay. His distance is great, okay. The metrics love him. I'll probably use him a little bit, but I don't feel extremely confident about it, especially for him being 10th. Patrick Rogers, again, I was really high on him at the Fortinet. He disappointed me. Metrics say he should be good again. A lot of it based around these par 5s. Okay, just The one player that I'm really, really high on, and I think it was, I don't know if it was you, P, or if it was Awaken, that mentioned Brandon Wu at the Fortinet. And I was not on him. I did not like Brandon Wu at the Fortinet, and I don't believe he made the cut. No, he did not. He's right up here. The metrics loved him, but he had played the course awful. Now he was number 1 in the 550 to 600s again, all that kind of stuff. But I was kind of just off of him for whatever reason. He was 89th. This week he's 9th. So he's 6th in the analytics models. He's only 3% owned. He's still number 1 in the par 5s, 550 to 600. He's top 20 in Fast and Lightning Bermuda performance. He's top 10 in putting from 10 to 15 feet. So if this range is indeed important, like I think it could be, sets up well for him. He's good off the tee, great off the tee. There's a lot to like with Brandon Wu, so I can't remember if it was UP or if it was Awaken. I am on the Brandon Wu train this week, so fire me up some Brandon Wu. Elsewhere, here in the low 7s, not really a whole lot. Like Austin Eckroat as a Korn Ferry Tour grad, he was 4th, I think, in my KFT rankings. Okay. For as much as I really liked Paul Haley at the Fortinet, he's just kind of meh here. He was number 1 at the Fortinet. He's 9th for me here at the Sanderson Farm, so I'm off on Paul Haley. Let's move to the 6Ks where a lot of your fellow contestants are going, and I've got some ideas for you all. I really do. I'm feeling pretty good about some of these 6K plays. So players that are popular with your fellow contestants, Callum Tarrant, you can see where I had him in the analytics, third overall, 22nd, or third in the analytics numbers, 22nd overall. But he's at 7.5%. That's pretty high for a 6K. 7.5 for John Huh, 7.5 for Chesson Hadley. Like you can see where these players are in my rankings, and they are being gravitated towards by the analytics community, or at least the Fantasy National community. So we're aligning on that. Other players are coming down to Austin Smotherman as well here. I'm not there. I wasn't there at the Fortinet. I don't think he played well, or if he made the cut, it wasn't great. Not there, but your fellow contestants are going there. Adam Shank's getting some love. Okay. Par 3s are good. Irons have been very, very good. I don't think it was my call. Okay. It might have been Awaken because I knew it was mentioned at the Fortinet. But, yeah, give me all the brand woo that you can get. But Adam Shank, interesting. 6,700. Is ranked in the top 45 for me. Very good at the par 5s. Number 2 in irons. Number 7 in par 3s. There's a lot to like with Adam Shank, but he's getting some love. Other players, Adam Long's at just under 6. There's a couple of players down here that are getting some love. 63. Yeah, there he is. So I talked at the English is great. I talked at the top of the show about Ben Griffin, where he was in my rookie ranks, where he is analytically in my overall ranks. A lot of people are gravitating towards Ben Griffin. I was really hoping that I found a diamond in the rough there. Though does not look like he is as unique as I thought he was going to be, or hoping that he was going to be. But I also feel better knowing that a lot of the others in the analytic community are seeing what I'm seeing. At 6,300, he is almost 7% owned, projected owned. Fire up some Ben Griffin. You're not going to regret it. You're not going to regret it. He might be the chalky play in the 6Ks, but for 6,300, you can fit so much more in terms of pricing. We'll find you some uniqueness. Don't worry. I think Ben Griffin's going to absolutely be worth it this week. So there is a quick look at that. Or I'm sorry, that was where your fellow contestants are going. I do want to give a couple of names here for you all. Again, Matthias Schmid. I'm back on Matthias Schmid this week. Take a look at Matty Schmid, 16th in my rankings overall. Not very highly owned. Top 15 in Fantasy National. Yes, some of these, this is all from limited number of rounds. I think 6 to 10. So it's, a small sample size because he doesn't even have Bermuda putting. But what is there is very, very good. So take a look at Matty Schmid. I do like Callum Tarrant a lot. John Huh. Some of these other players that I have been kind of playing around with. I'm going to save my Korn Ferry Tour special, my Paul Haley of the week for the lineup construction. But I did want to throw out a couple of names there. Matty Schmid, Callum Tarrant, even though he is getting some love. John Huh getting a lot of love, but I'm pretty high on him as well. Also, take a look at MJ Defoe. He wasn't rated that highly among my Korn Ferry Tour guys. It's kind of interesting. He strikes me as an interesting option this week. If we go to my Korn Ferry Tour rankings, like number 4 of these guys, but number 4 in terms of the par 5s, number 2 in distance, which won't hurt him here at the Sanderson Farms. The par 3s, they might not matter, and that's where he's getting hurt. MJ Defoe is interesting. He's interesting. Okay, So let's come back to the overall rankings and do some tiers contest before we start making some lineups. So for those who play tiers, I'm not an aficionado by any means, but all I can do is assume the ownerships that the Classic has. That's all I can go by. I've played them a little bit. They're not my thing. But if you play them, this is how I would approach it if I were playing tiers. Tier 1: Sam Burns, Sahith Theegala, JT Poston. I think it just has to be Burns. I think it just has to be Burns. I hate to say it because I'm off of him in classic lineups, but in a tiers contest where you only have 3 choices, give me Burns. Tier 2: Russell Henley, Denny McCarthy, Taylor Montgomery, and Keegan Bradley. I'm going to take Denny McCarthy. Taylor Montgomery's probably going to be pretty chalky. Russell Henley might be chalky. I'm hoping to get a little bit of uniqueness here with Denny McCarthy, and especially thinking that putting is going to be so important. Give me Denny McCarthy in Tier 2. Tier 3: Scott Stallings, Christian Bezaidnu, Emiliano Grillo, Davis Riley, Thomas Detry. Detry is interesting. I don't know how popular he would be in tiers. So Detry is very, very interesting in a tiers format. But for me, give me Davis Riley. I think he's going to be a little less owned than Emiliano Grillo. Probably less owned than Scott Stallings. I really like the way this sets up for Davis Riley, which means you probably should fade him because I was really high on McNeely and he missed the cut. So I really like Davis Riley, so that's my pick in Tier 3. Tier 4: Sepp Straka, Adam Hadwin, Harris English, Taylor Moore, Seamus Power, Trey Mullinax, and Gary Woodland. I think the overall best play is probably Taylor Moore. We talked about Harris English. We talked about Harris English. If you believe that the health is back, fire him up. Sepp Straka, again, for the same reason that McCarthy and Brendan Todd. Like, he's interesting. He's number 1 in strokes gained putting, fast and lightning Bermuda. So for me, it's between Taylor Moore and Sepp Straka, depending on how risk averse you are. Tier 5: Chris Kirk, Wyndham Clark, Brendan Steele, Aaron Wright, Andrew Putnam, Justin Suh, and Dean Burmester. Now, rankings-wise, it says Wyndham Clark, and it's not close. Chris Kirk is the number 1 wind player, so if you believe wind is going to be a big factor, you probably should take Chris Kirk. I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to go with Andrew Putnam. He just popped on a whole lot of the metrics we talked about on Monday. So, and I'm thinking he's going to be pretty darn unique. Give me Andrew Putnam in Tier 5 as my unique play for tiers contests. And then Tier 6, David Lipsky, Matthew Neesmith, Brandon Wu, Dylan Fratelli, Matthias Schmid, Rory Sabatini, and MJ Tafu. For me, it's between 2 players, Brandon Wu and Matthias Schmid. Take your choice. I think either one is fine. Either one is fine. So there's a look at the tiers contests. Let's make some lineups. So if we're going to build around these chalky lineups that your fellow contestants are making, and again, just a reminder, if you see the fingers, just typing the way I have this layout set up, I guess. If we're going to build a chalky lineup that we think the fellow contestants are going to be making, it's going to start with Sam Burns. He's the obvious highest choice right now at almost 20.5%. And he's not really breaking the bank either, only at 10.7. Yes, it's expensive, but not necessarily breaking the bank. From here, it's one of 2 options. Are they trying to build a somewhat balanced team, or are they going to go stars and scrubs? I'm going to do 2 different styles, both of them using Sam Burns. Let's do the balanced build first. They're probably going something to the effect of Sam Burns, Emiliano Grillo, Davis Riley, somewhere in that category there, in the 9s. But you can see 20.5%, 17%. And then in the 8s, Trey Mullinax is the guy getting a lot of love there at 83. So this means that they have about 7,300 per. I generally try not to go into the 6Ks for a balanced lineup, but You might have to, because there are some popular plays in there. But I'm going to try to balance them out at either Lee Hodges or Hayden Buckley. I'll use Hayden Buckley at 7,000 just because he's the higher owned player by about 0.5%. So they are at 7,400 per. Some players here that are getting some love, like Alex Smalley, is at 75. Leaves them 73. Anybody in the 73 is getting a lot of love? No, not really. But this is Stephen Yeager or Davis Thompson. I'm going to use Davis Thompson because I'm going to use Yeager later. So Davis Thompson. There's a look at what I think is a chalky, balanced build that your fellow contestants are using or making, or at least the shell of it. You know, they might have some differences here, like Davis Riley. Maybe they're going like Taylor Moore here, but there's a shell of a balanced lineup that your fellow contestants are going. If they're going stars and scrubs, then they are, and I hate to do it, but I'm going to have to repeat names. I'm going to be using Ben Griffin, and he's at almost 7%. So if they're going stars and scrubs, they're coming down to 6,300 for a Ben Griffin. They also might be using another 6K. I'm going to try not to force them into 2 6Ks, but they might be. But ideally, they would probably try to squeeze in a Russell Henley as well. If they aren't, this will easily transition to Taylor Montgomery. But I'm going to try to give them Burns and Henley. And then they're probably going to try to squeeze in another 8 or 9. Like Taylor Moore. I'm going to try to give them Davis Riley and like go on full stars and scrubs. So like you have a 7K, a 6,900. Like at 6,900, you had, who was getting love here? Callum Tarrant, 68, Hadley. Yeah. So I'll just switch it up. Let's do Lee Hodges and Chesson Hadley. Like I said, I tried not to do 2 6Ks for them, but some of the ownerships are pretty high. So that's not nearly as high, 12.5%, only because they're coming down to all the way to Ben Griffin, who's at almost 7%. That's still fairly chalky, especially with these 3 up here. Like if they came down off of Henley, maybe went like Taylor Montgomery and Davis Riley. Now they have a little bit more to play with here. Let's see if there were somebody in the Chesson Hadley was at 68. Adam Long was at 6%. Oh, Smotherman, 8.3. So they could probably go something to the effect of like Smotherman. Let's try that. Smotherman, Lee Hodges. Alley's on 6,900. Man, that stinks. I didn't want to do that, but maybe it is what it is. Chesson Hadley, John Huh, and Lee Hodges, or at 7,100 if they found somebody like that's 12.3%. So there's a lineup, a shell of a chalky stars and scrubs, and maybe they're not using the same Burns. Maybe they're doing, maybe they're coming off of Burns and going like Poston and Henley. Does that fit? Yeah. So I mean, kind of that general shell of a lineup. So let me show you what I have been trying to maneuver around, because it's hard. Because I like a lot of the same guys in the lower end of the price board that this analytics community does. I mean, it kind of stinks, but like the 8Ks are just kind of getting ignored. Except for Trey Mullinax and Taylor Moore, they're just getting ignored. So Wyndham Clark is kind of speculative because he does not have very good course history. But I'm going to use him based on the numbers. So this is what I've been trying to go in terms of building around these chalky lineups. I'm still using JT Poston. It's chalky, but you got to use somebody. And I like JT Poston a lot. I like Davis Riley a lot. So I am well aware that I am setting myself up for a 4v4 right off the bat. Sometimes you just can't help it because I'm not comfortable with Sahith this week. Like Taylor Montgomery, that's a lot of ownership for a player that has one start as a PGA Tour professional. Like Scott Stallings is fine, but he's 15% owned. Like there's just not a lot to go here. And oh shoot, sorry. So I've been going JT Poston, Davis Riley, hoping that they are the least owned in their areas. But then I do come down to a Wyndham Clark at 8,000. And then in the upper sevens, I've been talking about Andrew Putnam, who I really like. Nick Hardy is at 7,500 that I really like. So let's take a look here at maybe those two. I mean, that still gives me 7,600. If you like Dean Burmester, Brendan Todd for the putting narrative. I like Alex Smalley. Like we're at 10% here, and you don't even have to jump into the low sevens. Which I really like that idea a lot. So that's one construction. Like that's the balanced build, or maneuvering around there to try to make a balanced build to combat what I'm thinking is going to be a pretty stars and scrubs heavy DFS slate. Now, if we are trying to maneuver or use a stars and scrubs, again, I'm not going to use Sam Burns, but you're in one camp. You're either you're using him or you're trying to beat him. I'm just going to try to beat him on the narrative of the President's Cup. So very well could lose to him. I'm accepting that. Just like I could have lost to Max Homa. Fortunately, I had enough uniqueness in Thomas Detria, Paul Haley, etc., that I made up for not having Max Homa. But anyway, so if I'm going to try to build a Stars and Scrubs style lineup and still be unique enough against the field, I'm going to go, again, I hate using the same names, but it is what it is. I'm using JT Poston. Russell Henley fits just as well, but I'm using JT Poston, and then I'm going Denny McCarthy. Well, Denny McCarth, as he's known, I guess, around here. And then Davis Riley. It kind of is what it is. Like, Emiliano Grillo fits here as well, but he's lower owned than Davis Riley, so I'm just using Davis Riley in this example. And you see, I only have a little at 7,000 per player. So I'm going Brandon Wu, who I really like at 7,000. Let's see. And other players here in the low sevens that I mentioned, like Stefan Jaeger, he's pretty chalky, but I like Stefan Jaeger. Depending on how many Korn Ferry Tour grads you're comfortable using, like Zaiching Do would be a fine speculation this week. Davis Thompson's very popular. I'm not there, but he's very popular. Let's see. Other players here, like Gligic, if you want to believe my analytics, even I'm gun shy on that one. Brandon Wu, Lee Hodges. But I'm going to actually kind of come up in here into the 72s and 3s. I'm going to try to fit, and I can fit him, Stefan Jaeger. Can I go any higher maybe? Maybe a Nick Hardy? No, I don't think he fits. So I'm going to use Stefan Jaeger. I'll be a little bit out of order in terms of pricing. But I got 6,700. And this is my Paul Haley of this week. The guy that is a home run, all or nothing. And I'll show you why here in a second. But I'm going to go with Augusto Nunez as my bomb, if you will, my Hail Mary. He's only at 1% owned. He's 6,500, which, if you're superstitious, that was the same price Paul Haley was. So I'm neither confirming nor denying that I'm superstitious, just saying, if you are. But let me show you why I'm so high on Augusto Nunez this week. He's not even rated all that high in terms of my Korn Ferry Tour ranks. I mean, the par fives, one of the most important things here, was not good. That not good even compared to his peers in the Korn Ferry Tour. The reason I'm high on him is I'm believing in the easy narrative. Fourth on the Korn Ferry Tour in birdies or better gained when it was easy. Second in total, strokes gained total when it was easy. There's a lot to like there. He's fine with distance. He gives himself plenty of opportunities. He's really only he's better than everybody but Ben Griffin in terms of opportunities gained of all the players up here. At least opportunities when it's easy. He's fine on par fours, par threes. Like, this is why I'm pretty high on Augusto Nunez as my Hail Mary. I mean, Defoe for the same thing. Like, his par fives are great, and his distance is fine. So if you want to believe that the distance is going to matter, Defoe should probably be your Hail Mary. But I'm going to go with Augusto Nunez. That's my bold call, I guess, if you will, this week. That I'm going to use Augusto Nunez a couple of times, hoping that I strike lightning in a bottle like I did with Paul Haley. So with that, there is a common lineup that I've been building, or a shell of a lineup that I've been building stars and scrubs wise this week, maneuvering around the chalk. And I mean, you can even move off of Stefan Jaeger if you want to be more chalky, or if you're comfortable being a little bit more highly owned than the 9.7%. Like, you can move Brandon Wu around. I just really like Brandon Wu, but you know, you can move Davis Riley into the Taylor Moore, Trey Mullinex area, and you know, perhaps come off of Augusto Nunez if you're not comfortable going there, stuff like that. So there is a look at some of the lineups that I have been building, some of the lineups that we think are going to be chalky this week at the Sanderson Farms. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Again, please put it in the comments. Did you like seeing the wind finder and then a quick review of who was good in the wind, as opposed to me putting it in the mixed condition model? That way you can use that information as you wish to move your rankings around and adjustments to mine. I would really appreciate it if you put it in the comments, you know, how you thought of that. Thanks, James, for jumping in chat there and watching via Twitch. I always appreciate that. Reminder that I will not be on Twitch tomorrow morning. After I submit my lineups on a Wednesday night, I'm generally pretty dead. But I will be on Friday. I will be on Friday morning, 10:30. We will be looking at how I submitted my lineups, how close I was to these projected ownerships, and if I was right in my maneuverability around them. Probably just kind of hang out too, play a game, or just, you know, hang out, chat, and all that. If there is interest in a showdown, James, I would be more than happy to do that. 10:30 would probably be a little late to do the early round or the early field of the showdown, but I could definitely do the PM portion of the field. So if there's enough interest in showdown, jump in on Twitch. Be more than happy to, you know, give you my 2 cents in terms of a showdown idea. It's not my area of expertise, but I can give you the stats and tell you what I see as a statistician. So, but yeah, James, thanks for jumping in chat in Twitch. P for jumping in chat in YouTube and watching, always supporting the channel like you all do. And thanks to everyone out there who watches and listens, supports the channel by commenting, liking the videos. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully the little reminder in the bottom left corner wasn't too much of a distraction. I'm not the kind of person that asks for subscriptions and all that stuff. But you know, if you liked what you saw and what you heard, consider subscribing. It would help me out a lot. But thanks again for all the support that you all give me. Really do appreciate it. For all of the wagers that you've made this week at the Sanderson Farms, for all of the DFS contests you've entered this week at the Sanderson Farms, for this weekend and every weekend. May all your bets be profitable.